So I stumbled across this interesting paper. It's called Uniting Contemplative Theory and Scientific Investigation Toward a Comprehensive Model of the Mind. And I thought this was a cool paper with some discussions that are juicy for the geeks of meditation maps and models. So let's jump in and talk about this paper. This paper was published in Mindfulness in February 2023, so it's been out for about a year as I'm speaking to you now. And it was written by Malcolm Wright, Jay Sanguinetti, Shinzen and Matthew Sacchet. And with the exception of Shinzen, these are all members of the EPRC. The EPRC is the Emergent Phenomenology Research Consortium. And if you're not familiar with it, it's a group of people and organizations that are seeking to bridge the gap of their knowledge and understanding of spiritual, mystical, energetic, or magical experiences and the clinical understanding of these same experiences in order to improve outcomes for people who might be in these sort of situations. Similarly, the purpose of this paper is to bridge incongruities between objective, low-level observations and meditator subjective reports. So connecting things like EEG, fMRI, and measurements of immune or endocrine responses, those objective measures with first-person accounts of mental states or experiences in order to understand how they're connected. And the way that the authors seek to do this is by looking at three different models from Theravada Buddhism. These are the Five Aggregates, the Six Sense Consciousnesses, and Dependent Origination, and flattening them out and integrating them into a single, the thin model of the mind, which ideally will allow them to prepare better hypotheses for bridging these incongruities, linking understanding across this first person and third person boundary. And it's important to me that these are functionalist models. So they're not looking to develop a complete ontological description of what is real in the cosmos. They're really honing in on a specific purpose, which is, in the case of the Buddhist models, trying to inform how we train the mind, how we work with our phenomenology. And in the case of the thin model of the mind, develop these hypotheses, drive research, and allow us to take steps forward rather than understand what's true in terms of what exists.
What the authors are looking to do is come up with a model of an autopoietic, autonomous entity with embodied cognition, consistent with other descriptions that we have in the literature. So if we're going to recover this from Buddhist doctrine, we could start with the Five Aggregates. These are form, consciousness, third, they list perception, which we might construe as a recognition of an object. Fourth, feeling tone, or the valence. And finally, sankhara, or volitional tendencies. And I'll just note these as intentions for our purposes. This is great as a starting point, but what is missing here is a feedback mechanism and a way of increasing the nuance, of expanding these points into broader categories. If we want to get the sense consciousnesses out of here, the six senses, they are see, hear, feel, taste, smell, and thought. These allow us to expand and add more nuance to the consciousness category. So how does dependent origination help us recover a form of feedback? Well, the four blocks that they break the chain of dependent origination into are: one, the ultimate source of stress; two, a basis of perceptual processing; three, the reaction to perception; and four, the learning process or behavioral reinforcement that occurs from this. So this is learning, and this is where the feedback comes in. So what is the thin model that they came up with to capture this autopoietic system based on the above? We have form. This is something that has a degree of ongoing interaction with the environment. Set of innate or learned guidelines. There are sense organs that can perceive the environment. There's a database of concepts that allows sense data to be perceived as objects. There's recognition of sense data as being concepts contained within the guidelines. Next, we have an action tendency arising from the processing of concepts and guidelines to set behavioral priorities. Following action tendency, there's a feedback mechanism that allows us to update the guidelines from experience. Finally, there's an optional qualia of self. So this synthesis meets the requirements for an autopoietic system and is more valid, they contend, for generating hypotheses.
So once we've established this thin model, the authors describe a number of ways that it can be applied and give examples. So the most obvious example is for a human being. We have a physical body. We have guidelines in the form of our genetic predispositions and all the conditioning that we've experienced and internalized. We have 6 sense organs we've already talked about. The concepts in the form of memories. We recognize things based on those concepts and have action tendencies in the forms of problem solving, decision making. And finally, all the things that I described are subject to feedback. They can be evaluated based on outcomes or fittedness to the environment. And if we apply this same sort of analysis to a microorganism, we can see a lot of the areas are lacking. There's going to be limited recognition, limited feedback besides natural selection there. But if you step up to a quadrupedal mammal, a lot of these things are present, but maybe in a less developed quality. So in that way, they start to show that the thin model has explanatory power. There's a longer example describing how this could be applied to describing the jhanas or forming scientific hypotheses about the jhanas, how specific mental states correlate with specific bodily phenomena that can be quantitatively observed. And I'm not going to unpack that now because it's quite a long discussion, but I think I just want to sum up by saying that I appreciate, after I got better acquainted with this paper and calmed down my metaphysical parts, I appreciate more the steps that the authors are taking to allow emergent phenomena to be studied and described scientifically, and to allow us to form better questions about what's physically going on that correlates with these mental processes. So I hope this was useful, and look forward to coming back with more discussions of maps and models and geeky meditation things. So thank you for watching.